Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Energy MD podcast, where we are on a mission to help 1 million people increase their energy naturally without prescription so they can have more fun and more success in every aspect of their lives. So, really excited. As you guys know, I love talking about the different causes of low energy and fatigue. And we're going to be talking about some more today with my friend Cassie Bjork. So, let's learn a little bit about Cassie. So she is a globally recognized industry leader in weight loss, the CEO of Redefined Weight Loss and Redefined Vitamins, a highly sought after speaker, #1 international best-selling author of Why Am I Still Fat? The Hidden Keys to Unlocking That Stubborn Weight Loss. A registered dietitian for over a decade, Cassie has helped thousands of people achieve the bodies they want by supercharging their metabolism, mastering their mindset, and unlocking their weight loss. She also helps dietitians build profitable, freedom-based businesses they love. Virtually every major media outlet has featured Cassie's debunking of health and dieting lies as she shares the truth about food, weight loss, and supplements. Cassie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. I'm really grateful to be here.
So we're going to be talking about mold, parasites, Lyme, and toxins that could be blocking your energy levels and how to heal it.
Yes, when you mentioned the name of my book, I was thinking, yes, why am I still fat? The hidden keys, to unlocking that stubborn weight loss. And there's so many hidden keys. I like to think about it as kind of like this big puzzle. And with everyone, that comes to me, it's like weight loss and low energy are usually their top two struggles. And my goal is to figure out, well, where are the missing puzzle pieces? Like what pieces are out of place? What ones are totally missing? And what do we have to do to get that puzzle back together, which is, our body.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about these hidden keys. Are there some myths or some hidden things that right off the bat are things you're looking for when you first see somebody?
Yeah, I usually kind of look at the person's, main symptoms. They might say weight loss, they might say low energy. A lot of times they say they have, sugar cravings. And those are definitely all clues to what can be going on. I think like the number one thing that I see in almost every single person that I've helped lose weight that's really a surprise to them is inflammation. And, we hear about it like in the functional medicine based world, but a lot of, doctors and dietitians and practitioners aren't really talking about it. And I think it can be really confusing for people because, we think of inflammation as like, well, we get a paper cut, we stub our toe, there might be some swelling and some redness and it heals. But what I'm finding is that the chronic inflammation that festers deep inside, that's a result of, toxicity and potentially pathogens and dieting over and over exercise, even just like, the things that we touch and the air that we breathe every day, the products we use, there's so many things that can cause inflammation, but we can't see it and we can't feel it. So, if I bring it up right away, the women that I work with are usually like, I don't have inflammation. Like I seem pretty healthy. And so I think that's like one of the big surprises is, when people come to me to lose weight, they just a lot of times will think it's got to just be like this diet that I just haven't discovered, even though they've usually tried like every single diet under the sun. And dieting in some ways like can work short term, but the people that I help are just sick of being in that cycle. They're sick of the low energy, the cravings for sugar and carbs, the having to start over again and again. And they're like, what is going on in my body? Like they usually know that there's like something there that they're missing. And these are usually really smart people that have done a lot of research. They have a lot of information. Some of them are doctors or even dietitians themselves, and they feel, kind of shameful that here they are asking for help when they're basically an expert themselves. And even if they don't have the credentials, they usually feel like an expert because they've spent so many hours, scoring the internet for, the right diet or the right exercise regimen. And the reality is we're just not given all of the information. And a lot of the things that are actually, blockers of our weight loss, blockers of great energy levels, blockers of our bodies just performing how I believe that they were designed to, these things aren't things that are just commonly talked about, like parasites, like Lyme disease, like biotoxin illness, which is, mold. I mean, these are things that a lot of times people are shocked to hear or to even think that that could be something blocking them from reaching their goals, because otherwise, a lot of times they kind of feel like they're like a relatively healthy person. But then when we really get down to it, it's like there's actually a lot of things going on, and all your systems in your body affect other systems. And I think that's another big, downfall of like the dieting industry is it's the belief that, calories in, calories out, just exercise more and eat less. And as long as you're in that deficit, you're going to lose weight. And, to some extent, it can work that way. And of course, diet and exercise are two pieces of a big puzzle, but your body is so much more complex than that. We've got to look at your gut health. That's where your immune function starts, your metabolism starts, cravings start. We've got to look at, your body's ability to detox and clear out pathogens and toxins. We've got to look at your hormones, your thyroid function, which is the master of your metabolism. If you have a slow thyroid, it's going to be difficult, to lose weight. If your hormones are out of balance, your hormones are the foundation of your entire body. And there's so many of them, and people have no idea, that they have inflammation or imbalanced hormones or an underactive thyroid. So there's all these different areas. And then when we start to look at it that way, people are like, well, no wonder I'm struggling. And I think it actually can provide some relief, because a lot of times the people I help are like, good luck figuring me out, because, I'm a unique snowflake, because no one can figure me out. And, my body must just be really stubborn. And it's like, the reality is, yes, we are unique snowflakes, and our bodies are actually, designed similarly in a lot of ways. So that's why a lot of the, protocols that I've used on women over a decade, like they're similar. We can personalize for sure, because everybody has different things that are off balance, and everybody has different health histories and environments. And a lot of the main things are still the main things. We want to be supporting our immune function. We want to be healing inflammation that can be festering deep within. And the thing with inflammation too, that I like to kind of explain it, like, it's like there's a fire in your body, and your body's main priority is always to stay alive. So if there's a fire in your body's not going to give you great energy. It's going to be drained by trying to put out this fire. It's not going to, be burning fat all day long, because all those resources are trying to put out this fire. So the more we can support your body in the healing process, in keeping your metabolism up and your immunity up and inflammation down, the better results you're going to see, not just in your waistline, but in just your body overall, and how clearly you think, and your moods and your energy levels and consistent energy levels, how you sleep, how stressed out you feel, and just how you show up in this world. And I think at the end of the day, that's the goal. I believe we're meant to live an amazing life, and we're meant to live life to its fullest. And so many people are struggling with things that they really don't need to be struggling with, because we just need to get to the root cause. And when we heal from the inside out, that's where real freedom comes.
I love that. There were so many mic drops in there.
Just kept
I
going.
I think especially the idea that if you want to lose weight, you got to look at mold, Lyme, parasites, toxins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And these are things people don't really think about, and are pretty surprising that they could be struggling with. Yet over 60% of people have parasites. And it's like, we deworm our animals, our pets, but a lot of times we don't even think about that could be something that we're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And then same with, most people don't know much about Lyme disease and about mold, and, and they all kind of work together. Usually if we're struggling with one, we're struggling with one of the other. And also symptoms can present similarly in Lyme and in mold. It's a lot of cognitive function stuff, brain fog, fatigue, moodiness, anger, rage. And then with parasites, it can kind of seem like usually people think something is off and they're just not sure what it is. It's a lot of the mood stuff though, because even parasites can actually manipulate your mind, and they can cause cravings because they thrive off of sugar and carbs. So people will have these intense cravings. And when you're actually getting physical cravings, it's really difficult to not give into them. So I always tell people to like, give yourself grace. Like if someone just tells you, even if you're on a diet and it's like, just don't eat these things, well, usually we want to eat the things that we're told not to eat. And if our body is physically telling us to, if there's parasites in our body manipulating our mind and sending signals to tell us to eat carbs and sugar, it's really, really difficult to win that battle. Mm-hmm. So we kind of have to, give ourselves grace, and also, address it by like attacking and binding and detoxing. And there's a whole process to really go through. But we want to support our body from a lot of different angles. And I think it can be confusing because a lot of times like symptoms they're not necessarily like these huge, like, you know, you wake up one day and you can't move your legs and you end up in the ER, you know, like big, huge things. A lot of times it's just like, yeah, I've had a lot of cravings. I haven't felt like myself. Personality changes are pretty big. You know, parasites. And a lot of times with parasites, you know, they release toxins in the human bloodstream and they can cause, you know, constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloating, nausea. But people might just think, you know, kind of felt sick lately, not really sure why. So it can be difficult to really pinpoint. And with lab testing, a lot of these things aren't really going to show up on labs. And the thing about labs is we're kind of, I feel like as a society, we're kind of programmed to want to see the data. And I love data, so I'm not against that. But testing, you know, like for Lyme disease, it's really difficult because the infection can hide in these biofilms in our body and spread throughout our body. Parasites often missed on lab tests. And, you know, and also with parasites, Lyme and mold, they all are really good at hiding in the body. Like parasites are super sneaky and smart. They can actually hide in this biofilm structure that protects them from your body's defenses. So it's kind of like they're invisible to your immune system. And then they'll develop relationships with other pathogens, and they'll kind of they're resilient. There was actually like a study done where a worm was defrosted from like 42,000 years ago, and this is just going to sound insane, so people can look this up. And it was defrosted on a petri dish, and then when they did that, it actually began to move and eat. Like, that's crazy. Like, these critters are so resilient. So the other thing is, you know, before we even get into get deeper, just knowing that like this can take time. It's not usually just like a quick, it's never an overnight fix. And just with anything with our health and our bodies and making, you know, lifestyle changes, we have to give ourselves grace and be patient and consistent and not perfect. You know, I think it can be overwhelming for people because and especially with like, you know, past dieting mentalities and what we're being brainwashed with, it's like we have to be perfect, we have to do everything right. So sometimes then people just won't do anything. And it's like, you know, it's really important to just get started, help support your body, and you don't have to be perfect, and give yourself grace along the way too.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So in terms of addressing some of these things, you're a RD, a registered dietitian, right? How is your approach going to be different than a functional medicine doctor?
I think, you know, conventional doctors oftentimes will throw antibiotics and drugs at things, which can have, you know, a time and a place sometimes. But I think the holistic approach is really about addressing all your body's systems and getting to the root so that you feel better overall and you don't kill your gut with antibiotics in the process. And it's just supporting all your different systems. So as far as, you know, how I'm different from a functional medicine doctor, I might not be that different. My approach is probably pretty similar and pretty aligned. A lot of times, if like it's a really complex case, then they might also be working in conjunction with a functional medicine doctor. And then I might be supporting a lot with like, you know, the nutrition and the supplements and really helping them personalize that regimen. If there's, you know, if there are, you know, and sometimes there are medications involved. Sometimes sometimes someone is put on an antibiotic, like right when they, you know, get Lyme disease, and that's not always a terrible thing. So in that case, they might also be working with a doctor in the process too. But it's kind of more of like the whole mentality of, do you want to heal your body? Do you want to really get well? It's really not just about, you know, eradicating the critters out. It's really about making every system in your body work better and healing the damage that was done. And that's how we can really, I think, show up as our best and feel our most confident and have great energy levels and be sleeping well and just be, you know, thriving in life. It's not really just about getting rid of. I hear people like in addiction recovery talk about that too. Like, it's really not just about getting rid of the addiction and breaking free from, you know, alcohol or sugar addiction or workaholism or whatever it might be. It's also about like rediscovering, you know, yourself as a whole. And I think that can apply with whether you want to call it sickness or just, you know, overcoming a history and a mindset of dieting and viewing, you know, our relationship with food and our relationship with ourselves. A lot of times when people have been, you know, following a diet for years, and then, or if they've been sick for years, you know, putting a label on themselves, like as a person that has Lyme disease or is a sick person, like we need to unbrainwash ourselves from that. We need to overcome that and really step into the identity of, I'm healthy. Like I'm not sick. Like my body is healing and I'm powerful and my body has the ability to heal. And I think in our, conventional medical system, that's not exactly the mindset. And the mindset is more of like, here's a pill, here's a potion. You're getting older. Your metabolism slowing down as you get older. Weight gain is normal. All these symptoms with menopause and things that they tell women, they say it's normal, and it's like it's common, but it's not normal. And there's a big difference. Someone who suffers from any disease, there are things that are common, but we don't have to make that the norm. We can still support our body in as many ways as we can. So I think in everything that I do, I'm always trying to work in the mindset components too. And it can sound a little fluffy, and I don't always like to just talk about mindset. The reality is it's so important because our words are powerful and our body really, in a lot of ways, becomes what we tell it. So, someone who's followed diets their whole life, they might start my program and they might start seeing results, and then they kind of freak out. I've seen this happen before, and they start to self-sabotage. And they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm finally losing weight. This is what I've wanted. I'm starting to feel good. And I just keep like binging and doing, I don't even have cravings. And I just find myself destroying all the progress I've made. And I think it's a common thing because we're not always given the support, like on the mindset level as well. And even like the spiritual level, it's like a lot of times it's just like, let's fix the problem and then you're on your way. I think there's just so much value in looking at our body as a whole and every day becoming more of like who we are and who we're meant to be and stepping into that.
Yeah, about a year ago, we implemented mindset as well as emotional support for folks who are going through the program. And that was a lot of the journey that I had been on, where when I had my fatigue and I came through it, some of the major things that I learned were how to improve my emotional health, but my mindset. So we have like a 4-step mindset process that we take people through. You talked a little bit about the mindset. Can you tell us any other tips? Like if there was one thing about mindset that you would want to convey to people today, what would it be? What would be a practice that they should start?
I think in line with everything I just said, affirmations are a big one. And I always do this like the first week of any of my programs. And I always preface it with like, I know you're probably going to roll your eyes at this because it doesn't sound, like rocket science, and it might not even sound that powerful, but it is amazing when someone picks 1 or 2 affirmations, like, my body is healing and every day I make the right choices to heal it. That's just a simple sentence. And you write that on a Post-it note, a bunch of Post-it notes, and you stick that on your mirror, on your alarm clock, on the fridge, like on the cabinets, on the door. So you see it on your way out and you actually, say it when you see it. That's so powerful. I've had women talk about how they'll go to the snack cupboard to like emotionally eat, and they'll read that Post-it note. Like, I make choices that honor my body every day and everything that I do. And they think about it and it's like, yeah, this isn't going to honor my body. And you can still make the choice. So I always tell people it's kind of also like, there's a couple of parts to it. Number one is like, we're reprogramming our brain. We're unbrainwashing ourselves from things that aren't true. Like fat is bad for you. That's not true. That's a myth. We need to unbrainwash ourselves and realize that fat is really supportive of our metabolism. It's really supportive of our brain and for our body. Calories aren't bad. Calories are good. They fuel our body and they give us energy and they boost our metabolism if they're the right one. So unbrainwashing ourselves from things like that, but also, when you're pausing to like say an affirmation, you're creating space. So I had this doctor who was trying to lose weight, and her biggest thing was the break room at work always had donuts and cookies and birthday cake and all of the things. And she just could not walk by it without going in and having something. And she just, she was just like, it's just something I'm really not able to do right now. And she's like, and I don't want you to tell me not to do it because I can't not do it. So we decided, let's just create a little bit of space. You can still go into the break room, but how about you go past the break room and like, write down an affirmation, read one of your affirmations, just kind of like just take a pause just for even like 30 seconds or a minute. So she would do that. She would walk right past it. She'd go to the bathroom and she'd go one of the stalls and she'd, take out her phone and she'd read one of her affirmations. And then she would go back in the break room and binge on whatever sugary, carby foods were in there. And we just kept adding space. So eventually she would go see a patient in between, and then she would go see a couple patients in between. And then eventually she didn't even go into the break room. Like, she felt so empowered that she could just walk right by it and not go inside of it. And she could say an affirmation in her head. And so it's not always about just changing everything in the moment. And I think we can be so hard on ourselves too. And that's the other thing. I think I've already said it, but giving yourself grace. And I don't take that lightly, because we're so hard on ourselves in general. It's like, why can't I stick to this diet or do this thing? And why won't my body just get better? Why is it taking so long? I hear that a lot. Why is it taking so long? And so I always try to set the expectation that when you're healing from the inside out, it's going to take longer. And the beautiful thing is, you're not going to have to start over. You're always building and making progress. Like a diet, for example, if weight loss is your goal and you're doing a diet, once you stop the diet, a lot of times you gain the weight back and more, because you've messed up your metabolism and now your body doesn't trust you. And then when you start the diet again, it's harder, and because it's damaged your metabolism. So, we're not in that cycle anymore. Now we're actually healing our body from within. We're balancing out our systems. And so if you go off track a little bit, you're still building. You didn't undo everything that you did. And so I think part of, the mindset component is, just checking in, throughout the day, setting reminders on your phone. I have reminders on my phone that actually say affirmations. It's just an alarm on my phone, but it pops up and I turn it off, but I read the affirmation first. And so, creating space can be a huge thing. And that can be with anything. I mean, like something like coffee enemas, for example, a great way to help your body detox and get rid of, eliminate toxins. And, if someone's constipated, that's, not a good thing, because then we're keeping toxins inside. We want to get those out. So if someone's not having at least one bowel movement, ideally 2 good bowel movements a day, I might recommend that they do some coffee enemas to help, get things going. And that can be like a scary big thing for people. It was for me when I did my first one. I knocked the whole thing of coffee over and I had it all over my bathroom floor, and I never wanted to do it again. But maybe small steps. Maybe it's not doing that a few times a week. Maybe it's just like once a week, and then you start adding it in more. Or even like, in the infrared sauna, great way to detox, great way to sweat out, toxins come out through our sweat and through our poop. So there's like the 2 things I want people doing, sweating and pooping. And the sauna, like for people that are pretty blocked in their detox pathways, it can be difficult. And so some people start with 5 or 10 minutes in the sauna. I'll do 90-minute sessions, but I wasn't always able to do 90-minute sessions. I worked up to that. So it's giving yourself grace and starting, we always say, slow and low with, with supplements, with detoxing, with most things. And not everybody has that approach. And I can understand people wanting to hit it hard, but also Herxheimer reactions are also a real thing. And that can happen when we're not supporting our body in the way that it needs to be when we're releasing toxins. So the best way to avoid that is to, go slow, see how your body is tolerating, different protocols and modalities, because everybody is different. One person can tolerate something really well, and to the other person, that's going to cause them to feel really sick. So also, not necessarily just comparing and, paying attention to your own body and your own like personalized approach. And we work on that as we go.
Yeah, you're totally speaking my language here. Baby steps.
Yeah.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. Body likes small changes. These are things that we repeat time and time again. And I'm so glad that you brought that up about the Herxheimer reaction or the die-off reaction, where we tell people we want you to feel badly about this much, just a little bit, so we know that you're feeling badly.
Yes,
and we know that
like
something's happening, right? But not so much where it derails you, because if you don't set things up for success, which I want to talk about next with you, if you don't set things up for success, then you end up with, 1 step forward, 5 steps back, instead of 5 steps forward, 1 step back. So how do you set people up for success?
I think setting expectations is important. So like I said, acknowledging it's going to be a journey. And I always want people to be honest with themselves, with me, with any other practitioners, because our goal is to help you. And if there's something you're not willing to do, or you're not going to do it, it's like, I remember being you know, in, I don't know, even like with my physical therapist years ago when I threw my shoulder out, would tell me to do all these things. In my head, I knew I wasn't going to do them, but I said, okay, I'll do them. And I left and I didn't do them. So, and I don't want anyone to ever, you know, like I can handle if someone doesn't want to do something that I'm recommending. If they're not going to eat something I'm telling them to eat, that's okay. I'd rather just like know that up front. And I want them to be honest with themselves too, you know, and I love when people have really big goals. And also we want to make sure we're setting out action steps that we're actually able to do and aren't overwhelming. Because like I said, a lot of people, if there's too many things, they just get into kind of like analysis paralysis and overwhelmed and they just don't do anything. And that's not going to help either. So I think setting the expectations up and everyone goes at a different pace and recognizing that, and life happens. So you might have these big dreams and goals and actually truly be motivated. And then something comes up and you know, maybe you did slide back a little bit, and that's okay too. So I think it's all part of like, you know, giving ourselves grace, being honest about our process. And, you know, if something like, you know, the die-off reactions come up, they can make you feel pretty miserable. And it doesn't mean the protocol is not working. It means the protocol probably is working because it's a signal from the body that, you know, your body just needs more support. And so slowing down and backing off, that's not a bad thing either, because we don't want anyone to feel horrible. Otherwise, you're not going to continue. I wouldn't. So just really being, yeah, I think just being open and honest and communicative, doing the best you can, but also not, you know, stressing about it, because stress can backfire too. You know, I tell my weight loss clients that stress, if you're stressed about it, we're actually working against what we're trying to do because, you know, cortisol, our stress hormone, that spike can cause you to gain weight without eating any differently, without exercising any differently. It increases our blood sugars and that gets stored as fat. So you can actually gain weight from being stressed out. And that's not even mentioning stress eating. So, or, you know, not even mentioning other hormones that are thrown off when we're stressed out, like ghrelin and leptin, which are hunger and our full hormones, which cause us to eat more and when we're stressed out or eat less. So it's, you know, it's like we have to kind of, yeah, just go slow and, you know, learn as much as you can. Also, I think another thing is not needing to be perfect. I see people that they want to know every detail. They want to know every answer to every potential question, and they create situations that never actually happen. And then they stress over them as if they're happening. And it's like, let's just get started. You know, let's not wait until January 1st or next Monday. Let's just get started now. And then we can assess roadblocks and tackle them as they come up, if they come up, but they might not come up. And the ones that come up might be ones we didn't even think about. So there's really no need to put energy into things that haven't happened yet. And that can apply to life in general, not even just health, but, you know, situations in life. Because I do it myself. I'll play out a scenario in my mind of something that never actually even happens. And it was just really a waste of my energy. So I think just learning to take life as it comes in general, and then applying that to health as well. And it's good to be proactive and it's good to be prepared, but we don't have to be too prepared because we don't always know what's gonna come. And then when it does, we can work on it.
Yeah, we find that a lot of people in our program are perfectionists or have perfectionistic tendencies. And so we have a journaling practice 4 days a month, and we're in the middle of it right now where we're talking about perfectionism and having people journal about it. But yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, it served us when we were dealing with our parents, when they told us not to do something and we were perfect at not doing that thing, right? Or maybe it was in school or college or medical school or whatever. But the reality is that now it's no longer serving us, right? And so how do we unwind that? How do we have more compassion for ourselves? How do we love ourselves more? So
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're bringing that in.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, like detoxing is hard work. Getting rid of disease and pathogens can be hard work. And, you know, you don't have to suffer through it. But I think, compassion is a big thing. The women, I mostly work with women. They mostly have control issues and are perfectionists. And the beautiful thing is, this is also, any health regimen is an opportunity to get to redefine yourself and how you show up for yourself and in this world in general. And I think, a lot of what I do with my clients ends up affecting their lives and their relationships and their families, not just health-wise, but I even have a client right now that we're working on boundaries with her friends and with her family, because it affects her health, and it affects, the things that she eats, and it affects her moods, and it affects how she feels, and it affects how she sleeps, and all of those things matter. She matters, but she's used to putting other people first, and it's hard for her to stand up for herself. And she's gotten so much better at it. And she's like, Cassie, I can't believe I never thought hiring a dietitian would end up, we'd end up talking about boundaries and my relationships with my sisters. And, but it's all connected. And I think that's also like just kind of like a deficiency that we have in our current medical system, is separating everything out. You see this doctor for this, you see this doctor for this one for this. And it's like, but our body, we have a whole body, and everything is connected, and all of our systems affect one another. So, and so does our life. We're human beings. We have a lot of things going on. We have minds, we have bodies, physical bodies, and we have souls, and everything is connected. So I love that you take that approach too, and you address from all the different angles. A lot of practitioners don't.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned boundaries. So how does somebody know if they have a boundaries issue?
Oh, that's a great question. I think if they feel that icky feeling after talking to or being with someone, that icky feeling where you walk away and you're just like, yeah, I kind of just feel icky, right? Or maybe violated, or like, I wish I would have said something different. I'm not sure what. I feel like a lot of times with people, it's with their families. Families tend to be the hardest ones to set boundaries with, not always, but a lot of times. And so, I mean, even like for an example, kind of like a nutrition example, is people will get worried about going to holiday celebrations because, grandma or Aunt Sally expects me to eat the pumpkin pie. I don't even like the pumpkin pie, but she's gonna be so mad if I don't eat it, or she's gonna feel really bad. I don't want to make her feel bad. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And that's real. And I love that. I love that someone would care so much about another person to consider eating something that they either, don't want to eat, or it's not on their nutrition plan, and they, it's not worth it for them. And I think it's like, it's important to be able to learn how to make someone feel loved, but then also holding your own boundary. And your boundary might be, I've been on a healing regimen, and I'd love to eat this, and I'm sure it's amazing. It always is. And it's not, I'm not going to be able to do that this year. Or, and it rolls over into so many other areas, not wanting to have maybe like the mother-in-law over the holidays. So you might just say, we're too busy, we've got too much going on. Well, then she might come back and say, oh, I can help with all that stuff. No worries. And then she ends up at the house anyway. And now the person's feeling resentful. And I think resentment is another sign that you need to work on your boundaries. Because if you're resenting someone for something that you said yes to, and I've done this before, I've said yes to things on my calendar, and then the day comes and I'm feeling kind of resentful. And then I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, it's actually my fault. I'm the one who said yes. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And of course, it's easier said than done. But I think that it really can apply to any health regimen, because we have to really stand up for ourselves and our bodies. Another interesting thing too, I heard that parasites are like a boundary. It's like a boundary issue. So it's funny that you bring that up, because I heard that like parasites, they are infesting your body, and you're essentially giving them permission in a way. You're like letting them violate your boundaries. I heard that people that suffer from parasites, which like I said, over 60% of people have them, so it could be a lot of us. I heard that a lot of times they end up having boundary issues in life in general. And I don't know if there's actually like solid research behind that, but I remember at a conference, I heard about that, and I thought, well, that's interesting, because you kind of look at that correlation, of these diseases, these bugs that inhabit our bodies. And it's like, are we letting them live there? And parasites are super stubborn. Like when you try to kill them, they fight back. And so a lot of times it's not even just like, a Hirsch reaction. It can also be the parasites, they don't want to die. So they're going to try to make you stop your protocol. And sometimes things get worse before they get better, and people might want to quit. And I always say, just keep pushing through, because sometimes it gets harder, but the breakthrough's on the other side. We just have to keep being diligent, even when it's hard. That can be really hard.
Agreed. There's a couple things that you said in there that I wanted to comment on. I love talking about the boundaries, and talking about make your yes be your yes and your no be your no. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research on people who say no more often are healthier, they're more successful. I think it was Warren Buffett who said, people who say no a lot are successful. People who say no all the time are really successful. And the reality is that when you're saying no to something, you're
Mhm.
saying yes to something else. And oftentimes you're saying yes to yourself, right?
Yeah. Yep. I love that. Yeah, my friends tease me because I have a line that they say that I've coined. I don't think I coined it, or I don't think I didn't trademark it, but my line is, I'm not available for that. And I mean, no
That's
is a full
good.
sentence, but a lot of times people kind of want to like justify or explain. You don't have to explain anything. So if someone asks me to do something, and I don't want to do it, I'll just say, no, I'm not available for that. And, I might say like, thanks for asking. I hope you can find someone. I'm not available for that. So it doesn't have to be short or rude. And you also don't have to provide an explanation or a justification. You don't know. I mean, if you want to, you can. And sometimes people do it first when they're when they're developing their boundary setting skills, but you don't have to even explain. No is a complete answer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love that you said that.
Hopefully that everybody who's hearing this right now has taken that to heart and they start to implement it. One of the things that I've learned in the therapy that I've been going through is that I'm not responsible for other people's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
that's been a big thing. I've kind of like bent over backwards and, really trying to make sure I'm taking care of everybody and everything. It's part of the reason probably why I became a doctor, right? And so
Yeah.
so that's a really good practice for me to remember. And I
Mm-hmm.
encourage everybody who's kind of in the similar situation to latch on to one of these tools, put them on a sticky note, like you were talking about, set a
Yeah.
reminder on your phone so that, if you are in one of these relationships where you realize that, you have these boundary issues, you're not saying no as much as you want to, that you can have the confidence to know that, hey, you're not alone. Lots of
Mm-hmm.
people deal with this and have a tool in order to be
Mm-hmm.
able to move forward and take care of yourself.
I love that. And I think even with like that increases confidence. Like the more we say no, it actually increases confidence in us and standing for our own truth and holding our boundaries. And I love what you said about we're not responsible for other people's reactions. We don't have to manage them. Yes, we can care about people. We can love people. We can care about their feelings, and we don't have to manage them. I remember I
Mm-hmm.
used that line a few years ago. This guy at the gym asked me on a date, and I said, no, I appreciate that. I'm not available for that. And he was like, do you have a boyfriend? And I was like, no. And he wanted an explanation. And I felt kind of mean. I felt like maybe I should like explain. And I also realized like I didn't owe an explanation. And I was nice, I said, I appreciate that. That's brave for you to ask. I think I said that. And I said, and I try to use the word and instead of but. That's another kind of like subtle shift that I shifted a few years back that I've noticed has been pretty powerful, because generally I feel like the word but kind of negates everything you just said. So instead of saying,
Absolutely.
I'm not available for that, but I say I'm not available for that. And also like I appreciate it. So, and I think that this also, I mean, with like a health regimen, talking to yourself and your body, like, even just like, no, I'm not going to give in and just go eat all the sugar in the cupboards. I'm not going to do that. My
Mm-hmm.
body is worth so much more than that. I honor my body every day. And, yeah, I can have a snack if I'm hungry and I feel like it, but I'm not going to treat my body like trash. And I think just like, even just speaking like confidently and firmly like that is so powerful. It can, to other people, yes, but also to ourselves. And when we're on a health regimen that can be difficult, yes, it can be difficult. And that's why a lot of people give up and a lot of people don't push through, but they also don't get the breakthrough that's on the other side. Like when it comes to weight loss and like healing inflammation and healing, getting rid of, parasites, Lyme, toxins, mold, like these are like longer term things.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone that I've talked to who's seen success, they always say there was a point where I wanted to give up. There was a point where I was questioning, like, is it working? And, your mind can play all these games. And that's why we've talked so much about mindset today and how important that is. But you just, and I always say, borrow somebody else's testimonial. Listen to it works for other people, like it can work for you too.
Mm-hmm.
And so pushing through those times, because anything that's worth it is usually not easy to obtain.
Yeah, I remember a meditation teacher one time talking about the monkey mind
Mm.
and about so much of our thoughts are child consciousness. And
Mm.
so it is, it's the child that's being impetuous or saying, I want that sweet. And like, how would you respond if your child was actually saying that, if you're a parent? My
Yeah.
14-year-old grabs for something and I'm like, hey, can you make a better choice?
Yeah.
Right? What if we were to actually talk to ourselves about that? So much of this is about taming that mind and actually having it focus on things that serve us, right?
Yeah. And I think, Joe Dispenza says that we have like 70,000 thoughts a day. And like, or maybe it's even more, it might even be like 90,000 thoughts a day. And 90% are the same ones we had yesterday. So I think that's why it's so important that every day we just program our mind a little bit. Maybe it's just sticking to one affirmation a day, and maybe we work on that affirmation for a month, and then maybe it's another one. But really, we have to think about the way that we're thinking, because there's also set point theory with our weight, which is the theory that our body wants to go back. It always wants to stay at a certain weight. It's not going to want to lose weight, and that's why it can be difficult to push through a plateau and to basically reset our body's set point. And I think our minds are like that too. We have to actually like train them to think differently, and we have to rewire our brains in a lot of ways, and it's possible, but we do have to be diligent about replacing negative thoughts with positive ones, believing in ourselves that we can do this. And when we say to ourselves, I don't want to do this, I want to give up, this sucks, even just like that mentality of like, this sucks, I can't eat anything, I'm sensitive to everything, I have to be on this diet. What if we reframe that? Like, I have the opportunity to eat foods that are going to heal my body, and my body's healing in the process. Like, it's basically saying the same thing, but it's a different approach to it. And that positioning can make all the difference.
So good. So let's talk a little bit about getting back to the physical stuff. Let's
Yeah.
talk about parasites.
Mhm.
And one of the questions that I always like to ask people is, what is your favorite Herxheimer support? What do you find that's
Mhm.
super helpful for people when they hit those bumps in the road? You're killing
Yeah.
an infection, you're removing a toxin, and they're not feeling well.
I think binders are like your secret weapon. They basically mop up the toxins being released, and they can dramatically reduce like the die-off reaction. So, and what you're doing is when you're killing these pathogens, they're released into your bloodstream. And so that can really make you feel, terrible. And so taking the binder is going to help, pull those out. So I like the Cellcore one. They have biotoxin binder. We have one called Detox Redefined. That one is not quite as intense. Ours, I normally recommend for people that if they have a glass of wine or two in the evening, take a couple Detox Redefined before you go to bed at night to help just support your body in that. When it comes to something like, mold, parasites, candida, Lyme, I do think the biotoxin binder is a really good one. And they formulate it, in a way where it's really well tolerated. So some people find that binders make them feel sick or make them constipated. And I've never really had anyone that seems to have any issues with that Cellcore one.
Nice. And so do you just keep ramping up the dose depending on what symptoms people are having?
Yeah, exactly. And if they can tolerate the binder, which, like I said, everyone seems to be able to, I would say start with 2 or 3. And the great thing about that one is you can take it with food. So because it can be tough, a lot of supplements, it's like you have to take on an empty stomach, and then, well, how do you have any time to eat when you really map out supplements and stuff that you're taking and look at your regimen? So what I like about that one is, you can take it anytime, you can take it with food. Even for people that have kind of already gone through the healing process, I mean, like myself included, I usually take a couple of those at some point throughout the day because it helps with mycotoxins, which are from mold. And over half the buildings in the US are moldy. So there's a chance, like almost every day when I'm out and about, that I'm entering somewhere that has mold in the building, and I want to get that out of my body as fast as I can. So not really necessarily just for avoiding the Herx reactions, but yes, I mean, if you do get a reaction, if you do notice a die-off reaction, just upping the binder, and you can take those several times throughout the day. I've had people take, 4 or 5 at a time. Usually someone doesn't even really need that many. So I always try to go with like as low of a dose as possible to get the maximum effect. So usually 2 or 3 is a great place to start. Mhm.
So what's the highest dose you've ever had somebody on for a period of time? Sounds
Oh,
like 4 or 5, 3, 4 times a day, something like that.
I've gone to 8 or 9 myself, and I've had other people like, because I've known that I was exposed to mold. There's homes of people's that I can smell that it's musty in there, and I know there's mold in there. So I go to someone's house for an evening or for a day. And I can tolerate that stuff really well. For some people, that might make them usually constipation which isn't like a huge deal. You can take magnesium and magnesium citrate and help with that. But because I think mycotoxins in the body are kind of like a bigger deal. So I would come home and maybe take like 8 or 9 of them, and then maybe a few hours later, like I'll keep it on my nightstand. So if it's in the evening, if I happen to wake up in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning, I'll take another handful, which I know sounds kind of crazy, but and you probably, again, you probably don't need that many, but because I can tolerate that much, if it's a situation like that where I know that I've been exposed, I'll ramp it up because I'd rather just get that out of my body.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the cell core products, and they have, the Power One, Two, Three, Four. Do you find that everybody needs all of them, or do you find that there are certain ones of those that are especially good for getting rid of parasites?
It's a good idea. It's a good question. I think that the way that they all work in the parasite kit, I recommend taking all of those together. And I think also taking them around the full moon, because parasites come out and multiply around the full moon. So it's a really great time for people to um, be getting rid of parasites. But I recommend taking them together the way that they design that protocol. It's pretty simple. It's laid out pretty nicely, and it works really effectively as well. And I've had people go through it more than once. And, the cool thing about that protocol too is it's one of the only protocols that I've really had people on where they've seen worms come out, and, which can be scary and crazy, and also like really satisfying when you're doing a protocol and you can actually see that it's working, because a lot of parasites are microscopic. So if you don't see
Mhm.
anything in your stool, it doesn't mean it's not working. But when you do see something, or people have actually pulled them out of their nose. It's a really great place for parasites to hide. And they're sneaky and they're smart bugs, and they hide in your body and they hide in the sticky biofilm, so that they're not even always detected on tests because of that. So I think it can be satisfying sometimes to actually be able to see them get released. But if you don't, it doesn't mean that it's not working.
Yeah, and one of the controversies is the Para One product, the Mimosa pudica, where some people think that it's actually not worms that are coming out. Uh, it is either the biofilm or it's something that the Para One is binding to and kind of
Yeah.
pulling out. What do you think?
I don't know. I've wondered that same thing, because it can sometimes even look like biofilm, and biofilm, it's like, because it can be so sticky, and a lot of pathogens will kind of like form together. I don't know. I mean, and it could be both. I mean, and either way, let's get it out of our body. Let's
Hmm.
get it out. Biofilms can be super stubborn. There's that product called biocidin, that liquid like liposomal product that I think can be used for biofilm disturbing as well. That can also be helpful. And then maybe like an hour after you take that, utilizing a binder like the biotoxin binder. And then sweating, I think, is also good. Anytime you're on any of these protocols, I think doing like an infrared sauna, or if you don't have an infrared sauna or access to that, even some type of exercise where you're sweating to really get out some of those toxins. But yeah, that's a good question. And for just to mention too about biofilms, if people, I just think they're so interesting and super surprising for people. It's like, there's that sticky byproduct that these pathogens form, and then they adhere to your tissues, and that's how they hide. And they really work together, the pathogens in the biofilm, to overtake your immune system. That's why a lot of times people feel sick a lot, when they have these bugs that they don't know about. And mold can actually hide in the biofilm. And so can Lyme as well. So
Hmm.
that's another thing too, is like the order of operations, I think, is important just to mention, because you want to go after parasites first, I think is like a big thing. And they're all kind of connected. So if you have Lyme, you don't always know it. People don't always know they have Lyme disease until they're exposed to mold. And, what happens with mold is you're basically removing the protective shield over the Lyme, and now Lyme can come out. And the confusing thing is the symptoms are oftentimes very similar. So you might not know that it's Lyme and mold, but it's kind of like, Lyme is loading the gun. And then when you get exposed to mold, it pulls the trigger and you can have all these symptoms from, the mold exposure. And then there's also a Lyme parasite connection. When you clear parasites, a lot of times Lyme symptoms will go away. If someone knew they had Lyme and they were struggling with symptoms of Lyme disease, if you clear the parasites, your body's actually, I think it's because your body's just more able to handle the Lyme because your immune system is stronger and now you're not fighting off all these bugs. So clearing parasites can be a really great first step in, any health protocol, but also a lot of times we see breakthrough in weight loss as we're clearing out parasites as well.
Mm-hmm. Remove the blockage.
Yes, remove all the blockages wherever they are. And there's just so many factors that keep people unwell. So I think it's just so important to focus on all the different things. Like as you're healing, your gut is so important. I mean, that's where your immune system starts. It's where your metabolism starts. If you're getting cravings, with parasites, gosh, sugar cravings for carbs are such a huge thing because that's their preferred food, sugar and processed carbs. It helps them to replicate and, populate in your gut. So a gut healing regimen. And typically what I do for that is three things. I do glutamine, I do a probiotic, and I think fish oil is just a great anti-inflammatory overall. So the glutamine helps to heal the thin lining of your intestinal tract. And glutamine is also a precursor for the neurotransmitters in our brain that determine whether or not we get physical sugar cravings. So another great thing is, for anyone, whether you're struggling with, parasites, mold, Lyme or not, if you get cravings for sugar or carbs, you might need to just support your body in the production of these neurotransmitters so that you don't get the physical cravings. So I always tell people, if you're getting an actual physical craving, and sometimes they don't know, sometimes they're like, I don't know, I think it might be emotional, or maybe it's habitual. Maybe every night after dinner, you just go to the cupboard and you get a snack and you put together a bowl of ice cream or whatever it is. It might not necessarily be physical, but if you know it's a physical craving, there's a couple of things. It could be a sign of low blood sugars, because when your blood sugar levels are low, your brain is really smart and it knows that your body just needs sugar. So if someone hasn't eaten for a long period of time, they might crave sugar. Or if you ate like a huge bowl of pasta, anything that goes up must come down. So maybe an hour later you crave sugar. So that's one, biochemical reason why you might be craving sugar. And another one is some people are just lower in the neurotransmitters that determine whether or not we crave sugar. And those are created in our gut. So if you have poor gut health, there's a lot of reasons why it's going to affect your health negatively. Your immune function will be lower. You might have difficulty losing weight, all the obvious digestive things, diarrhea, constipation, bloating, gas, acid reflux, the things that come with that are kind of more obvious symptoms of gut health. But even if you don't struggle with those things, it can still be affecting your overall immune health and cravings too. So glutamine is like probably my number one favorite supplement of all time, because it's just so important for so many different things. And it's one of those ones where, a multivitamin, with mine, like you can usually tell a difference because we put a lot of B vitamins in there. So people feel energy when they take my multi-caps, but a lot of multivitamins, you can't really tell a difference. And what I love about glutamine is you actually, if you're getting physical cravings, you will be able to tell a difference taking the supplement, because your cravings will go down. And, you might not be able to feel that the glutamine's healing the inflammation in your body. You might not be able to feel that it's healing your gut. In fact, you probably won't be able to feel that. But over time, you might notice that your symptoms improve. You might be like, gosh, I used to, and sometimes people don't realize they even have symptoms until they go away, which is also interesting, right? How we kind of just become used to living a certain way. I had one woman say, I had this terrible back pain that went away like 3 months, into your program. I realized it was completely gone. And I'm like, you never mentioned anything about that. And she's like, yeah, I kind of forgot about it, even though it was like horrible and debilitating every single day. And same with some GI things. Sometimes people just don't really think to mention that they, have terrible stomach aches and that they have really bad diarrhea, like an hour after they eat every single time, or things that like seem like a pretty big deal. A lot of times we just get used to that and it becomes our normal. But it's not. And the amazing thing is there's some simple things that you can do to heal inflammation and to heal your body that aren't like that difficult, but you can see big results with. And I think that taking in a few supplements for your gut health, like probiotics, like glutamine, and like fish oil, I think is a really great one for reducing that inflammation, that you can feel a difference, not too long after you start taking them.
Brilliant. Cassie, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been wonderful to learn from you, to speak with you. Where can people learn more about you?
Thank you. Well, redefinedweightloss.com is where the party's at. You'll find all my different programs. I've got a free masterclass over there called Bye Bye Belly Fat that kind of outlines my approach. It's an hour long, and most people learn more in that hour than they have probably in their whole life when it comes to weight loss and how our bodies actually work. So that would be a good place for people to start.
Wonderful. And then you also have a free gift for our listeners, right?
Yes, and it really relates to what we talked about today. It's called 7 Ways to Heal Inflammation and Lose the Weight for Good. So disclaimer, even if you don't want to lose weight, this guide is still really great for learning 7 different ways to heal inflammation. We talked about action steps, like, 7 action steps that every single day you can take that's actually going to help your body, because a lot of people hear about inflammation, they hear about these things, and they have no idea where to start. So this is a great way. You could even just pick 1 or 2 of the steps and just get started with them and see how you feel. And that's at redefinedweightloss.com/7 ways.
Brilliant. And we'll drop all those links below here and in the show notes.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. What a fun conversation.
Thanks for being here. I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Thanks for listening, and have an amazing day.